Okay, so now let's take a look at some percent proportion problems that are real world problems and how we would set those up, how we would solve those. So again, percent is 1 per every 100. It's just a comparison to something out of 100. And we talked about if we took a 20 question quiz or test, you're still going to have a percent out of 100, even though there wasn't 100 questions, because let's say you got 18 of them right. We can compare that out of 100. The equivalent fraction would be 90 out of 100, which is the same as 90%. So our percent is just a round number out of 100 that everyone can easily compare to. We talked about how there are 2% proportions that we can use to help us solve percent proportion problems. And the first one is over of is equal to percent over 100. And the second one is part over whole is equal to a percent over 100. We said we're going to use is over of for numerical problems, for problems that say like, what is 7% of 80? Okay, when we see those words is and of, that's when we're going to use is over of. Okay, part over whole is for more complex problems that don't have those words in them. We're going to use those for real world problems where we can pick out the part, where we can pick out the whole, and we're going to set those equal to a percent over 100. So let's look at some examples. So for example, we have, there are 35 desserts on the menu at Burke's Bakery. 80% of the desserts contain chocolate. How many desserts contain chocolate? So we're looking for 80% of 35, and this is a real world problem. So we're going to say part over whole is equal to our percent over 100. Now remember, writing down which percent proportion we're using is a part of our work. We have to do that for every single question to show I'm putting the part on the top, I'm putting the whole on the bottom, and I'm setting that equal to a percent over 100. So writing the percent proportion is the very first thing that you should do for each problem. Okay, and then we're going to pick out the pieces that we know. So for example, in this problem, we know that 100 is always this spot down here because percent is always out of 100. Then I can see my 80%, so I'm going to put my 80 in the percent spot. Okay, now we have to ask ourselves, it says there are 35 desserts on the menu. So is that the whole menu? Is that part of the menu? 35 is the whole because that's the entire menu. And our question is, how many contain chocolate? And the desserts that contain chocolate are just a part. So that's our question mark. And now we have a proportion that we know how to solve. We can just set it up. We can cross multiply 35 times 80, and we get 2,800. We're going to divide out our remaining 100, and we get an answer. And so our answer is 28 desserts contain chocolate. Okay. All right. So let's look at example 2. It says Michael put $8,550 into his savings last year. If he puts 15% of his salary into savings, what was his whole salary last year? Now, this is a real world problem, so we know we're going to use part over whole equals percent over 100. Remember that this is part of our work. We're going to show this. This is our part of our step. Okay. So now we're going to set it up. We're going to pick out the pieces that we know. We know that this spot down here is always 100 because percent is always out of 100. We also know that 15 is our percent, so we're going to put it in the percent spot. Okay. Now we have to ask ourselves, is 8,550 part of his salary, or is it the whole thing? 8,550 is just how much he puts into savings. So that is just a part of his salary. We don't put every single penny we make into savings. That's a part of the money we make. It also says, what was his whole salary? Well, we don't know what his whole salary was. So that's where we're going to put our question mark. Okay. So the whole is the question here. And now we have a proportion that we know how to solve. We can cross multiply 8,550 times 100, and we get 855,000. We're going to divide out our remaining 15. When we divide out our remaining 15, this should say 15, not 100. That's my bad, guys. When we divide out our 15, we get that his whole salary was $57,000.